At that point, it's like it's all downhill anyway. I don't care.
I hear you. Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like we still got people coming, and Mr. Cullen is joining us. So we'll give it another minute. Another minute. Wow, you guys are excited about this topic. Talking about the weather. Oh, you thought I was going to do a monthly bookkeeping checklist today?
It's all about the weather.
That was just a joke.
Hey, where are you at? How hot is it over there?
What?
That's the topic. Where are you at, and how warm is it, or how cold is it?
Peter's in his car. Peter, don't look or talk to us while you're driving. Who else is coming in? Here comes Pam.
Oh, we got a little crowd here, huh?
We sure do. Apparently, it was a popular topic. I could actually tell because as soon as I posted it, people started registering like right away.
Yeah, I know even Andrew Argue registered. That was weird, huh?
You are so much fun.
Saw that.
Yeah, I took notes from that thing, and he basically likes to tell everyone common sense.
I love my one of my favorite experiences was a client who had hired me to do CFO consulting, who had also just hired a business coach, and apparently this business coach, he was paying like $150 an hour for his sage advice. After looking at his P&Ls, he asked for all these reports, and he prepared some nice looking graphs, showing like sales by customer and a pie chart to see where his, biggest customers were. And then after all that was said and done, and he supposedly was doing all this analysis, his sage advice was, you should hire more salespeople.
That was his advice?
That was the $150 an hour advice. That took about 2.5 hours to produce.
Oh my God.
Hire more salespeople. That's what I'm going to have to start telling people.
Classic.
I'm going to change my whole business model. I'm going to start my Seth David School of Marketing and just have people pay me.
I wanted to go into it because Roger Connect had hooked up with them because they were just co-sponsoring the webinar.
Right.
And Roger basically said hello, and let me pass it back to Andrew.
And that was that.
Pretty much.
All right, I'm going to get started.
Sorry for cheating on you.
I'm going to get started. This is being recorded. The recording goes up on my website, usually within 24 hours, sometimes within 7 days. As soon as I can get it up, I'll get it up so that you can access it. Talking about I call it the ultimate monthly bookkeeping checklist. You're going to see it also involves quarterly and annual stuff that need to be addressed. And I wanted to kind of give you all a little bit of background where this came from. I think it was about 1.5 years ago. I'd noticed that a lot of people in the Facebook groups that many of us participate in, you start noticing when the same questions essentially get asked, different ways over and over again. And I noticed a lot of people seem to be looking for like this monthly checklist, like just something I can go down and check off and say, all right, boom, boom, boom. As long as I know I've checked all this stuff off, I know I've done my job for the month and covered everything, didn't drop any balls, right? And strangely enough, I was going through some old Excel templates. I've developed so many Excel templates over the years, some that are in use, some that are not, that I have like an archive of them. And I never delete anything. I mean, I have timesheet forms that I created like 15 years ago in Excel. So I still have them. It's nostalgic for me. So I'm going through and I see this Excel file called monthly checklist. And I'm like, what's that? And I open it up and I honestly didn't even remember creating it. But as I'm going through it, I'm looking through it and I'm going through this. It's got several tabs in it. And I'm going through and I'm like, this is actually really true. I'm like, who did this? Because like I said, it was weird. It didn't feel like I was looking at my own work because I didn't remember doing it. Anyway, I thought this is perfect. I just need to maybe kind of clean it up, polish it up, what have you. And Suchi, for a minute there, I thought you had an afro going. I was like, did she grow her hair out?
Oh yeah. No, just it snowed like a tiny quarter of an inch. So like I'm wearing my snow boots and
nice.
I'm rocking my fur.
Perfect. It's just like, sorry about that little ADD move, but out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, who's got the afro going? And I'm like, that's Suchi.
Sorry to distract you.
No problem. It was a good distraction.
Yeah.
So
back to the weather again.
exactly. It's all about the weather. So I'm going through, and long story short, as many of you know, last year I started my Patreon program, and within that we've got 2 levels, 25 and up and 97 and up. I've actually recently added a third for people who really want like deep dive one-on-one coaching with me, where we would meet every week. And if you're wanting to learn more about that, just let me know and I'll fill you in, outside of this. But in the 97 and up program, we do a weekly call twice a week, actually. Tuesdays and Thursdays. And at some point last year, I said, let me show you guys this checklist. But what I had also done was I completely repurposed the checklist. I brought it into Smartsheet because I said, and I want to kind of bring it up to, this day and age and using the tools that I'm currently using. And if anything, I was thinking about converting it to Google Sheets. And I said, what? Smartsheet takes the spreadsheet concept and adds the robust project management features. I said, that makes sense to me to build this out in Smartsheet. And so I commenced to do that. And I think I spent a good 5 or 6 hours really kind of going through the spreadsheet and repurposing it in the Smartsheet layout and trying to get the formatting down. And then I was starting to, add on to it and add in conditional formatting and things that, at the end of the day, I know what I want. And I think what most of us want is something that I can kind of look at first thing in the day and say, and see almost like a dashboard, this is what I need to do today. Right? Now, before the question gets asked, because it always gets asked, so I'm just going to answer it. The way what I'm going to show you today is designed to work is you have one of these sheets per client. Right? I won't have time to go into it today, but there is a way that you can then create reports in Smartsheet where you could aggregate anything from these client-based checklists that are due today or within the next week or however you want to do that. That's obviously up to you at that point. But what I'm going to show you in the template is an outline that's meant to be used for a single client. So you will need to duplicate the sheets. Now, I think the reason the question comes up a lot is for those of you who are already using Smartsheet, with like a free account, you get so many sheets and then you have to pay. And even with the paid account, you get so many and you have to upgrade. I think my message that I want to sort of convey to you on that is if you're going to go in with Smartsheet and use it, stop worrying about the limits. Just pay the money. If you pay $500 a year, you're going to get more sheets than you can possibly use in a year. I promise. And the trick is also, as you're done with a template or with a worksheet, you convert that. You save it as a template. You can retain all of the data, all of the formatting. You can retain everything that was there, but save it as a template and delete the original sheet, and then it doesn't count towards your sheet count. So in Smartsheet, that's how you always want to archive things. So you'll do one of these sheets per client per year is the way I see it. And so at the end of the year, sometime in January, after you've been using it for a year, you'll kind of close out the previous year in it and then, create a new template for the year to come. And that's kind of what I just did over the last couple of weeks is we worked in our 97 and up call and kind of finalized it, went through it and said, is there anything else we forgot, anything we need to add? And, by the end of that hour call, I know I felt, and I think Sarah can attest, she's here from our 97 and up group, that it's about as thorough as it could possibly be. Sarah, would you agree? Sarah Prevost, not Laidlaw, sorry. Sarah,
Sarah squared. Hey, Sarah. Yes, I do. I love it. It keeps me organized.
Okay,
and I like
good.
the way you created it.
And I know Christy said she's been using it, and she seems to love it, so that excites me, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So, who wants to see it? Forget it. Let's not show it. We'll do it next week.
Show it. Show it.
All right. Let's do it. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
I'll take the silence as a yes.
Why is it so small?
Shut up. Adam, have you started using this yet? Tell the truth.
No, I have not. That's the truth. I was there though. I was there when we did it, and
I know you were.
I loved it.
All right. Let's go to the videotape. All right, so notice here, this little guy with the funny looking symbol in it, that's the template. This is the actual worksheet. That's how you know the difference. So, what we did was we kind of cleaned it up and then I saved that as a new template. And I think I need to do it one more time because I think I'd found an error. I put in like February 29th as the date because it carried over from last year. And last year there was a 29th. There won't be one this year in February. So that kind of screwed me up. So I have to resave the template. So
I thought you fixed it.
I fixed it, but I don't think I saved the new template after fixing it. Maybe I did. I have to check. Anyway, you know what? I'm going to move this over to my other screen. So since Adam decided to bust my chops about the screen being small, I'm going to move it onto the screen that actually normally is very small. So let me know if anybody has trouble seeing it.
I'm not busting your chops.
You always bust my chops. You're my resident chops buster. Okay. Now, notice January 31, 2017 is lit up because I have conditional formatting in here that's programmed to let me know what's coming up due in the next 30 days, right? Also notice that each month is zipped up. So, and of course, I also include December of last year because that's what really needs to be worked on during January of this year, right? In January, we're closing out December. So you kind of have to start off with the last month of the previous year. And you'll see that I've got, you know, it's a section for each month. And notice they're all zipped up. That's what these little plus signs are all about. Excuse me, down at the bottom, I have quarterly and annual. So you can click on these plus signs to expand anything. Excuse me. And somebody's echoing, so I'm just going to mute you. Don't take it personally. Here's my participant list. Okay, looks like you muted yourselves. Excellent. Thank you. And we're going to let a couple more people in since I stopped to look at the list here. Okay, so notice we have a statement of information that needs to be filed, and notice there's no date in here because this is based on the month that you incorporated. This is in the state of California that we have this. I imagine other states have something comparable. But each year we have to pay $25 and just file that nothing has changed about the officers and whatnot. So I leave this blank because depending on the client, the date's going to change. And like I said, in California, it's renewed in the month that you had incorporated. So one of the questions I have in my client questionnaire when I'm onboarding them is, when were you incorporated? And main reason for that is for stuff like this that I need to deal with, so I know when to look for things like this. And then, of course, I have on December, and some of these need to be updated again because this is now going to need to be done in 2017. So the 1st of December, so I'm planning ahead. I want to set up this very sheet for the following year already. You know, it's a good idea to start doing that ahead of time, obviously. Tax projections, another annual thing. You know, usually I like to start getting my clients ready for that in November. Right? So in November, we just kind of do a little bit of extra work, wrapping up the books, making sure everything's reconciled a little earlier than we might most months. And this way I can get the P&L and balance sheet over to whoever's preparing their taxes so that they can do tax projections. And this way that gives us ample time between then and the end of the year to do any planning if we want to do a SEP IRA or a Roth IRA or whatever we want to do in order to take advantage of, you know, additional deductions legitimately, of course, you know, where we'll need time before the end of the year to plan for that. So that usually it comes down to, is the client going to have the cash available to do what they need to do? Now, one thing, it's a trick I learned in Smartsheet that comes in really handy, especially when you have a sheet like this that's, as you're going to start to see, it's kind of a long sheet, especially when you have all the months expanded. But the good news is, the primary column, which in this case is my task or to-do column, if I double-click it, you can tell because the primary column is the only one whose type cannot be changed, right? So when you double-click it, you can tell this is the primary column, the task or to-do. The primary column is the one that these sort of zippers, and when you do subtasks, that's the one that it really works on. You kind of need to do it in there, and that's where the zippers will always appear. So usually you want your primary column to be your leftmost column just for aesthetic purposes. And if I right-click on the primary column, you'll have these choices here, expand or collapse all. So if I expand all, it expands every single month. If I collapse all, it collapses them. Very clear, very straightforward. So let's say I just want to focus on December. We're just going to expand December by clicking that plus sign. Now, within each month, I have it broken down into sections. So a little bit of background on this. How I developed this was I took my experience as an auditor, where really we used to use CCH guides to do the audits. And the CCH guides, I noticed, really had us walking through the balance sheet mostly and testing all the balances on the balance sheet. You know, and there's a phrase that they use, you know, in CPA firms, you know, that do audits where we describe the process as beating up the balance sheet and then going through the P&L. So I said, what if I took that concept and applied it at the bookkeeping level, so to speak? So obviously, we're not going to send out bank confirms to confirm balances, but we're certainly going to double check the reconciliations, right? We're going to verify in the normal sort of bookkeeping way that our bank balances are accurate. And so notice I've got it kind of broken out that way, where I said, all right, we're going to look at the banking, we're going to look at the revenue and the invoicing, right? That's going through the balance sheet, banks, and then accounts receivable, right? And then collections is another extension, of course, of accounts receivable. We're going to take that a step further, and you're going to see I have some testing that we want to do specifically around the customers, and then we look at sales taxes, and then here's the P&L part, the monthly expenses, right? So let's take a look at the banking section. The banking section now, pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to reconcile the December bank statements hopefully by the 4th of January, because theoretically we can get the statements that early, right? Assuming that there's a month-end cutoff, which most banks do, I think, for the bank statements at least. Now, the credit card statements, you might have to, credit cards often have weird cutoffs in the middle of the month. So you work that part out, obviously. So I have, what I've done is I've set up this column where you can put sort of how many days into the month do you want it done, and then a simple formula that takes the month that we're working on, and this is why we purposely do the last day of the month, right? So the last day of the month that we're kind of wrapping up now is December 31st, 2016. So I said 4 days in, I want to be able to reconcile the bank statements, which means based on this plus 4, that's going to be due on the 4th. Then we're going to update the current month's bank feeds, right? And I was kind of making an assumption here that we're using QBO, but obviously whatever software you use, or when I say QBO, maybe I should be more general and say, just cloud-based software. So the idea here is I want to update the bank feeds once a week. This is my typical client. Obviously, you can adjust this to whatever suits your needs and whatever suits a particular client's needs. Remember, this whole sheet is for one client. So the idea is every week, so on the 7th day of the month, then the 14th, 21st, and 28th. So each week I want to update the bank fees. Notice these are highlighted because they're coming up due very soon, right? 1/28/17. These are actually past due technically. And I have to check that because they should be actually lit up even more so than these because they are past due. So I want to highlight the things that are coming up due, and then I definitely want to know what's past due. So right now I only have something that says if the date due is in the next 30 days, then apply this format. So let's add a new rule, right? And this way you get to learn a little bit of Smartsheet here. So I'm going to add a new rule, and I want to say if the date due is less than today, right, or in the past. If the date due is in the past, that's the condition. Then we're going to say, what formatting do we need? Let's put the background in red. And then I can put the text in yellow. Okay, and you can see in the background that's already starting to light things up. And I applied the formatting to the entire row. Right? And I think now I remember why I may have taken that out, because then it lights up stuff like this that I don't necessarily want lit up. So again, that's up to you. But if you wanted to do something like that, this is how you could do it. The other thing that's important to note when we're creating rules and conditional formatting is the order of these matters. Whichever one is higher supersedes anything that comes below it. So that's important to note. I'm going to remove this.
Well, you should probably make that rule conditional that if it says that it's completed, that it doesn't. Only if completed on is empty, that it should light up.
Well, so that's where you need to do the priority, right? So if I have a completed on date at all, then, well, here's what I'll do for that, because that was actually, you just got exactly one step ahead of me, but that's the next thing. No, that's okay. That was good. It means you're paying attention. Let me just read the chat here real quick. It make the rule affect the cell, not the row, if too bright. Okay, yeah, that's Sarah. So yeah, I think I mentioned that by default it applies to the whole row, but you can choose to make the rule apply only to one particular cell. So now let's do the completed on, because I want it to be real clear when something is completed, and this has to come first, because it's almost like the last thing that happens in the workflow has to be first in this order, because that has to supersede everything else, right? So if completed on is not blank, right? Then for stuff like this, first of all, I want strike through text. I want the whole thing stricken through. And I'll just do like a dark gray. And just so we can still read what is there, we'll make the font white. and I'll say okay, and nothing lights up because nothing's been marked completed yet. But let's say I said, okay, I got the reconciliations done today, right? By the way, just like QuickBooks, I can hit a T, and boom. So there comes my conditional format, and it makes it very clear that the task has been completed. So again, to me, I really want this, visual stuff that lets me know very clearly where something's at, what needs my attention, what doesn't need my attention. Right? And then maybe what I will do is let's go back and add in the other rule. So let's say if something is past due. So date due is in the past. Okay. And then the formatting we'll do, again, we'll do a red background with the yellow font. But then instead of doing it to the entire row, we're going to do it just to the date due. That way it's not so sort of obnoxious, right? And that way what I can say is, well, the fiscal year, I can just put a completed on date, just so it doesn't impact that. Again, if it bothers me that that's all grayed out, all this kind of stuff is up to you. But you can start to see how this begins to come to life based on us setting up those conditional formats, right? Now, the date due rule comes last because, as you saw, then if I complete something, that conditional formatting supersedes it. Right? And so the banking part is very simple. We're just going to basically make sure that the statements are reconciled and make sure that we're updating the bank feeds every single week, right? And then what I do here, this is sort of, I do this 5 days into the month because if I've completed the reconciliations on the 4th day, then the 5th day into the month, what I want to do is I want to run that report. And a lot of you probably know this report. If not, hopefully you will now, or you'll understand how to create it. It's pretty simple. Now that you're reconciled, I want to run a report on the bank account from everything last month and prior for any uncleared items. And I'm just checking, are there any really old uncleared items that need to be dealt with? Maybe checks need to be voided or reversed, or we need to follow up with the payees and see, did you lose the check? Those kinds of things. That's what this is really all about. Now let's look at the revenue. Now, a lot of this you're going to see is a series of questions that we want to ask, right? So it may not be, like what we think of as a traditional bookkeeping function. It's more a question that they ask. And the way this is designed to work, the process, what it really needs to be is, and when we did this as auditors, and this is a lot of where this comes from, was we had these kind of checklists as part of our CCH guides, and we had to initial something and say that it was done. So even if it was a question, are the revenues correct? Do they make sense? Really what that means is I had to take the time to think about it and ask myself, did I run the P&L? Did I run the sales by customer? Did I review that with the client to make sure that it makes sense to the client? A lot of times I'll run a report like that, show it to the client. The client will say, no, something's missing. Just happened yesterday. In fact, it actually happened in their AR. My client that I was working with, I ran their AR aging, and they said, hey, something's missing. There should be another $5,000 invoice in here that isn't here. And sure enough, we found out that a credit memo had mistakenly been applied to it. Right? So little things like that can get caught simply because you created a checklist like this, or I'll show you at the end of the session how you can get access to this one. And you took the time to stop and ask and answer the question, right? And what's great about Smartsheet is I can log comments. If I have supporting documents that help me support what my answer is, I can attach them here, right? And we can have the conversation, and now it's really well documented. I mean, like I said at the beginning, this is designed to be extremely thorough. My feeling is that if you use this and use it the way it's meant to be used and use it entirely and thoroughly, you will blow your clients away with what you're able to do for them, because there's going to be very little that you're ever going to miss. And if anything, you're going to be doing things like this that are going to cause you to catch things that the client's going to be like, wow, I'm so glad I'm paying them because they're really keeping an eye out on things for me. We wouldn't have noticed that this invoice still wasn't paid, and the client may never have paid it. Who knows? So again, the idea here is to force yourself to look at these things. And my rule here at Nerd Enterprise is, as we begin to implement this, is going to be, if you put not applicable on this, then there has to be a comment that explains why. In other words, I don't want, because I know what I used to do as an auditor sometimes is we would mindlessly just go NA, NA, NA. And so eventually we had a smart manager who said, if you mark it NA, there needs to be an explanation why it's NA, which means you can't just mark it NA. You have to actually think about it and explain why it doesn't apply, right? And so what we've done is we've got an assigned to column, so I can say, I'm going to assign this to, who's here with me today? Sarah. Right? And then when Sarah completes it, she comes in and says, okay, I completed this today, right? And then she also says, she marks herself as the person who completed it, because maybe she didn't complete it. Maybe I ended up completing it, right? So this way we have it documented. So this is the exact digital current modern day equivalent of initialing that I completed it. And since we have the infrastructure here, why not put a date on there so I know exactly when it was completed? By the way, another really, really handy thing in Smartsheet, let's insert 2 more columns. I should have done this to begin with, is I want to see the modified by. And I'll insert 1 more column to the right. And these are the auto number system columns. And I want to see the modified date. I don't really care that much about when it was created, but I definitely care about seeing who it was modified by. Now, initially when you do this, it's going to come up blank. Once you save the sheet, then you're going to be able to see. So it lights up everything. Obviously, in this case, it's all modified by me. And you can see the dates, and the conditional formatting even applies to these columns, and filters and things can be used on these columns.
Seth, there's a question from Sarah about, do you let your clients see the list, or do you collaborate on
This is
separate
meant
sheet?
more to be internal. I don't know that I'd want the client to see, especially if I'm having discussions with Erica and we're talking about sales taxes, and I'm like, hey, I don't see the sales tax return filed yet, and it's late. That's not the sort of thing I want the client to see, especially because it may well be that Erica comes back and says, oh, no, it was filed. I just haven't actually put the PDF in the folder yet. Meanwhile, we could send a client into a panic about that when it wasn't necessary, right? So especially when we're being...
2 sheets?
I'm sorry?
Do you use 2 sheets, one for internal, one to collaborate with the clients?
Yeah, and I don't. The one that I would use to collaborate with the client wouldn't be anything like this. It wouldn't be this detailed. If anything, I might, based on something, if during our review here we decide that we need something from the client, then probably in the other sheet I would just create a task by way of what we call a request for information, right? And then using Smartsheet, I can send an update request. So I can select an entire row and send the update request. Just put in the client's email and put in the details and explain what they need. And the beauty of that is, they can log into that sheet and upload attachments and give me whatever I need, and everything's there. So you can start to see this substantially gets us out of the inbox, right? Because everything happens here now. Mm-hmm. But no, so I don't think I would ever want to show something this detailed to the client. First of all, the client's going to get overwhelmed and they're going to get confused. Some are going to look at that, get overwhelmed, and never look at it again, right? Others are going to look at it and get curious and want to know enough to be dangerous, and then they're going to become dangerous because they're going to start asking all kinds of questions, which is going to slow us down. And it's not because I'm trying to hide anything from the client. It's just that, like in the example I just gave, things are going to come up that can send the client into a panic unnecessarily and prematurely because we don't have all the information yet, right? So I'm very careful on that kind of thing about what I let the client see. Some clients, granted, if I have a client that I know is just, they're savvy and they're not sort of panickers, and in other words, if I have a client that I know I can sort of trust with this kind of information, then sure, I'll let them see it. But otherwise, I have a much simpler kind of task sheet, if anything, that I share with the client. And if anything, what I think I'm going to be inclined to do this year, because one of the things I've kind of established in terms of how I handle project management is I prefer to have 2 different apps, one that I use internally and one that's client facing. This way there's there's that much, it's that much less likely there'll be confusion about which world we're in, and so it's less likely that we're going to accidentally share the wrong thing with the client, right? So I'm inclined at this point, I think, to stick with this kind of sheet here as our internal management tool, and probably using Active Collab as the client facing, because Active Collab is real simple. And it can be easily organized, and that's going to be another one of these sessions coming up very soon where I'm going to really do a deep dive on Active Collab. Plus, I've got a lot of content on my site at sethdavid.com on Active Collab. And I'm going to be doing a comparison head-to-head Active Collab versus Asana, and essentially explain why, because I've been playing with Asana and Active Collab for the past year, but I'm going completely in with Active Collab and getting out of Asana, and I'll explain why when I write that post and do a session on it. But going back to the checklist itself, so we have, again, very, very thorough, again, we test the revenues. Do they make sense? We check with the client on the invoicing process. What is their invoicing process? In the case where the client wants us to do the invoicing, A, I charge extra for that, a lot extra, like $500 a month extra. And B, we have a whole separate sheet. That's another thing we worked on in our 97 and up calls this year, or last year actually. And I worked with Christy on it specifically. I don't know if she's with us this morning. It didn't look like it. But, she had posted on Facebook that she was struggling with the process of doing the invoices for the client.
I'm here.
Oh, you are there. Good. Good.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Christy, since I mentioned it and you, tell me what's going on. How's that sheet working with you and your client?
It's fantastic. My client loves it. She thinks I'm a freaking genius. So thank you.
That's my goal is to make you look like a genius in front of your clients.
Well, mission accomplished.
Perfect. So, and just quickly, without going too far off to the side on that, so we have a sheet that handles that process of just managing the invoicing so that the client can easily communicate with us without a million emails back and forth in a portal where it's all tracked. It's easy to find when I need to find the information I'm looking for. And, one thing I'll show you that's really cool that's sort of baked into that process is if we're using QuickBooks Online, those of you who use it may know this, and if you don't, you will now, but you can actually save the invoice when you're preparing it and get a link. That's one of the options in the little dropdown. Instead of save and close or save and send, you can save and share link. So you get that URL and you attach it to a row right here in Smartsheet, and then that link takes you to a live copy of the invoice that opens up in a browser. You don't need to be logged into QBO to see it, so the client can review it right there that way. And then they come right back here into Smartsheet, and they log their comments and say, hey, here's what needs to be changed. Put this in the description or take that out of the description, whatever it needs to be. So generally speaking, the way that process is set up, there only needs to be, we prepare it once, the client reviews us, gives us any changes. Once we make those changes and ask the client to review it one more time, unless the client wasn't thorough in telling us what needed to be changed, it's ready to go, right? That's the way that process is designed to work. So again, when there's a need, we build another template for that kind of thing. That's why I love Smartsheet. It's so flexible and so versatile. If I can conceive it, I can pretty much create it here in Smartsheet. So again, we're going to check with the client. First, we're going to check ourselves. Do the invoices look correct? Let me get rid of my completed on date because now the formatting's bugging me. So we're going to check ourselves. Then we're going to check with the client on the invoicing process and say, hey, client, are your invoices current? We, look at your AR. We might review the AR with them. Has everyone been billed who should be? And then is there a way to check the revenues? Depends on the client and the nature of their business. I've had a lot of clients over the years where there were agreements. So I could say, hey, client, give me a copy of your agreement with your clients or your biggest clients or whatever. Each month I can do a sampling and maybe each month test different clients. But bottom line, I can check their agreements and compare that with their invoicing and see, if their agreement is such that there should have been an amount billed, last month and another one this month, I can just make sure that the terms of the agreement and whatever it says about how the invoicing is supposed to go is what's being done in reality. And again, it's another double check that helps make sure that you or your client haven't missed anything. And again, this is going way above and beyond what the client would ever expect you to do as a bookkeeper. But when you do it, you'll be a rock star in their mind. Like Christy just said, they'll think you're a genius when all you're doing is following a simple set of questions and checking them off. And just, this test takes 5 minutes to do. It might take a little longer initially because you got to request the agreement from the client. And again, you can create a web form here, right? And just create something where they can just upload the agreements to you, or use a separate sheet for that. That's up to you, however you want to do it. And again, it might be that each month, this is not applicable because my client doesn't have agreements. They're a service-based business and they just bill the same thing every month.
Can I ask something?
Yes, you can.
I may be jumping the gun here as well, but I think it's relevant to this. Do you have a place where, this is kind of underneath each month? I know you're saying, I think you kind of mentioned in the beginning, you'll refer back to the previous month when you're doing it. Like in January, you refer back to the notes from December. But is there any place that you have where there's kind of a log of notes, either general notes, so that they're all kind of in the same place and you can kind of see, oh, 2 weeks ago they said this, and then...
So if you click the comments button down below, you'll see there are sheet comments. Those are global comments that pertain to the entire sheet.
Right.
And you'll also see row comments here. So that's where you can go and you can see the entire history of all the comments that were logged on a particular sheet. And then as I mentioned in the beginning, you can also create reports, to pull any information. So if you wanted something that shows you for all clients, let's say what's due or what's past due, you can create reports to do that kind of thing.
Right. So my question more is, do you have a structure or how do you use it? Or maybe if I could hear from the group that are using, some people that are using it, like the way I have it structured, I don't have anything like this, but on every sheet that I have for a client, I have one general notes on the top where every time you touch the client or every time you do that, you kind of put the comment there. If it's regarding, let's say, I don't have it as technical as like revenue collections, but I would have maybe, let's say, reports and filing. So any notes that are relevant to that item, again, there's the log always on that same row that someone's going in and putting the same notes in the same place that I can kind of refer back however many weeks or times that I want to. Here, right. I could imagine that when it comes to invoicing, and specifically if you're talking about a particular, invoice or client, that I would maybe want to have a kind of log where I can look back, like, maybe they got back to you, then you sent it to the client, and the client came back, like on that particular issue or that particular category, to kind of have a log of notes.
So that's where I'd use the row comments. So for comments, anytime you're performing a task, one of these tasks here, or if it's just a general thing about revenue and invoicing, then I would do it right here at the top level, right?
But that's not connected to your next month revenue. Then
Hold on, I know, I'm getting there.
Sorry.
So what I would then do is, let's say now we're 6 months in, and I want to see all the comments that were logged with respect to revenue and invoicing. First of all, again, the global comments log here, I can see it. I'll have other stuff in between, but that's also where the filters come in. So if I want to, let me first expand all the rows. And so let's say I want to see all the revenue invoicing general, right? Then that's where I'm going to use my filters. And I'm going to filter the task or to do and say equal to revenue. And let's apply that.
No, you go back to your filter for a second.
Yeah, something didn't work.
No, you chose is not equal to instead of is equal to by mistake.
Oops.
There you go.
Oh, and then it cleared me out of that one, bastards. There's one of these choices here that actually lets you pick from a list. So I think if you do is one of, there we go.
There we go.
And so now this way, I can say I'm looking for revenue and invoicing. And these all come in alphabetically now, so it's pretty easy to find, even when you have a lot of stuff like this. So I can do this and apply it. So it's going to give me these. Now let's say, I'll edit this filter and notice that it now gives the drop down, and I can name this. So it almost becomes like a memorized report, right? So I can say revenue testing log, something like that, right? Let me clear this out. And I have to have some kind of a filter. So task or to do.
Hi, Seth. This is Mariette.
Wait, hold on, because I'm right in the middle of something. Sorry, I just don't want to lose my train of thought here. Okay, so if I change it to the way I just did, now it shows me everything. The other thing is if I tag, my filter to, let's say, one of the light items that's in between. So let me say no filter again for a minute. And let's say I want to test, all the comments that were made just on this test, because you're going to see this appear in every single month. What I could do is I could filter for this. And here, let me copy and paste it so I can be very specific about it. And let's just say new filter real quick. And I can say, whatever, revenue test. Obviously, you'll name it something more meaningful. And then task or to do has that, and you check off this box here that says include parent rows. That way you can have the context, so you can see where kind of in the world you're looking. So that now when I hit apply, I'm going to see just this line item for every single month, right? But I can see also, the two parent levels above it. So I can see exactly which month I'm in, and I can see, then I can click, row by row on the comments box.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool.
So I'm sorry, Mariette, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I'm driving, so I had to step for a second. Anyways, no, I was just going to say I do it much simpler. So I have like the same, sheet by month for each client. But I do what she just mentioned. I'm not sure who it was. I'm driving, so I don't know who just mentioned what they do. But I just have two highlighted rows on the top of every sheet and each client sheet. And essentially one just says perm and one says like the year. So let's say it's 2016. And then essentially anything that's like a global comment will just go in there. And that's where we'll comment back and forth in there. So it's not like we have to go and do any of that filtering or anything. It's literally, if it's a perm comment, like let's say it's login information or something specific to like workflow for that client, it would go in there. And then the second highlighted column, a row, would be like global annual comments. And so I could just click on that row, open all the comments, and that's where it would be. And then pretty much every time I copy over that annual sheet, I can go back to any year because it's just a one highlighted row per year. And then if it's specific to that monthly accounting or bookkeeping, then it would go into that parent monthly. So it would go into like April 2016.
Right.
And it's just much easier for me to find comments that way.
Yep. So, and I've done that with clients too, where we, I'll insert, like, especially on the invoicing job, then I always have, two rows, just like you described, Mariette, where one is for me to kind of, give instructions to the client, and then the second one is for client to comment. But also keep in mind that, the other thing is, and I can train my clients to do this, but if you just click the comments bubble at the very bottom, you can have non-row specific comments, and that's meant to be your global, project comments, and that's where you would have the global conversation. So it's actually, there's nothing wrong with creating the lines, and it works great, but just know that there's also a way that's kind of built into this that's meant for exactly that purpose, where again, you just click the comments option at the very bottom, and notice I'm in the sheet comments area, so that's where I would go to access those kind of global comments, and so when I'm working with, if I was to share this with a client, if, like we were talking about earlier, I had a client that I sort of trusted with this kind of information where I was collaborating with them, or even if I was working with my bookkeeping staff on it, I would probably train them that, like Mariette just kind of pointed out, look, if it's specific, obviously as much as possible, I want to be specific to a task within a month. I want to keep as much context there as we possibly can. But if something is truly global, we can do that. Keep in mind also, if it's an annual thing, we have an annual section built into this. So like you just saw, I quickly right-clicked and collapsed all the rows, and then I can go straight down to the annual, and we can make comments right on the annual line. Or notice I have under 1099s, and then within 1099s I have something. So, again, I've created the space for monthly, annual, and quarterly stuff. And quarterly, you'll see we have payroll tax returns and sales tax returns. So again, I've made the space.
I just want to say, I've tried to do exactly what you said, but then my clients will say, Mariette, just make my life easy. Can't you just have like one row on top and that's
right, but
it?
Keep in mind, you're going out of context, because I've made it clear from the beginning, this is not something I intend to share with a client.
Oh,
right?
okay. So I jumped in at the end. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay. This is intended really for internal use, and I qualified that earlier by pointing out that, there are some clients I would trust with this, but most I would not. Most I would expect to get overwhelmed, which is exactly what you probably experienced. I said earlier, I would never share this much detail with most clients because they're either going to get overwhelmed or too curious, and they're going to slow me down by asking too many questions that they don't need to ask. It's just because they don't really understand what they're looking at, and they don't need to. So I have a much simpler sheet that I use for client collaboration. But like I said, there are some clients that I would trust with this kind of thing. So, so again, I try to provide as much context as possible. And then let's just use that scenario for a minute and say it was me and that client was coming to me because I was sharing this with them. And let's say that the client did exactly say, Mariette, what you said to you. And the client said to me, Seth, I just need something simple. My answer to them would likely, honestly, be something along the lines of, first of all, sure, I'm always going to look to accommodate the client where and whenever I can. So I'd probably stick in that row at the top and say, you know what, if you have any questions or you're not sure where to go, just use that. Right. But I would encourage the client that what I'm trying to accomplish here is to keep things in context, because right now it might seem easier to just throw a question up at the top. But in 3 months from now, if we're trying to remember what we said and what we were talking about, and by that time we know we were talking about March's bank recs, right? That's the logical place I'm going to want to go to look for that. Is I want to go then into March, which really would have been April's work. Right? And I want to go into, the April month for banking because that's when I'm reconciling the March statements. Right? So that's here, the month end of March, which is really done in April. So again, the whole point of this is to, yes, it's sometimes more work up front to create the efficiency that I want to create. And sometimes the clients don't know what they don't know, and they don't understand what's best for them. So they think they're asking you to keep it simple because they think that's what's best, but that's not always the best answer. So there are a lot of times where I'll push my clients a little bit and say, look, I'll always accommodate you. However, I'm going to try and push you to do things a certain way because I know that if we can accomplish that, we can make this process so much more efficient. Because at the end of the day, my goal with something like this is not even as much about, the obvious, which is making sure that all the tasks get completed and making sure we don't miss anything and making sure that we're on top of everything timely every single month. That's the obvious stuff. The less obvious stuff is that I want to be able to know when I have no independent recollection exactly where to go to find information that I need, right? And so, because after a while, even having the global comments thing at the top by inserting the rows and letting them comment there, A, I have no logic for what might be there and why. And B, over time, that might accumulate to a lot of stuff that gets hard to find, right? So again, the more context I can provide things, the better off we are, in my opinion, my humble opinion anyway. But, so this is essentially the template. Let me expand everything just so I can quickly, because we have about 15 minutes left, a little less, and I want to make sure I've at least gone through everything that's here for you all. So let me get rid of this completed date. So we looked at the banking. We started getting into the revenue. Are the revenues correct? Review it with the client. Has everyone been billed? Can we review agreements and tie to them? Is there another proprietary billing system? Like if your client is a lawyer, right? They probably have a separate billing system. Is there something there that can be compared to QuickBooks? We want to make sure that the sales in that system agrees to the sales in QuickBooks. If not, we might be missing something, or we might have duplicated something somewhere, right? So again, these are tests that a lot of us don't think to do, but I learned to do them from the audit process, right? Are all their client setups complete? Any new clients that they've had? Periodically review the client contact list with the client, and if applicable, run the P&L by job, check it for accuracy. Do they use classes? If so, run the P&L by class and check it for accuracy, right? And then next we have collection. So again, you're going to review your AR report. Is there something we can assist with? Maybe you can charge more and help them do some follow-up calls, and sometimes they like that because it's softer, coming from a third party rather than them calling themselves if they're not comfortable. So again, part of this process also helps you build up add-on services to your clients. Can we use QuickBooks customer letters if we want to send those out? That was based on the old desktop version. I don't know that I would even do that today, but it's there in case it's something you want to look at. Do I need to train them on using QuickBooks, right? Or if this is the bookkeeper going through the checklist, does my bookkeeper need training? He or she can look at this and say, yes, Seth, you know what, maybe you can train me on this. And then just a general comment, think about ways the process can be improved, make notes and review with account manager, I think is what it should say there. Yeah, there it is, just not wide enough. Okay, then customers. This one I love because this one is something that really can add value for the client. Our new customers coming in, that goes back to what we did up here. And did we check the customer contact list? When we review the sales by customer, do we see any customer line items where there's nothing all year until the current month? That indicates likely that there's a new customer or a revival of an old one. But if we don't see new customers coming in, that can be a concern that we want to bring up with the client and say, hey, I haven't seen any new customers coming in a while. What's going on? Are you struggling? Do you need help? Maybe I can help you bring in a marketing person. These are the kind of things where, especially nowadays, we can really get into it with our clients and give them that strategic high-level overview and use what the numbers tell us to help give them the guidance they need for how to grow and run their business. If there's no new clients coming in, that could mean trouble, right? So again, that's the kind of thing we can start to take the time to look at. It only takes a second to run this report and look at it, right? And you can do it every single month just as a double check. Sales taxes, again, pretty straightforward. We're just going to make sure that the returns are being filed on time and that everything's accurate and that sales tax liability is clearing out, right? And then we have the monthly expenses. And here I kind of just filled in some of the high-level stuff that you might, that are likely going to come up on almost any client. But obviously, you can come in here and hit the insert key and, fill in as many extra lines based on your specific client's needs as you want. But this is designed to have you look at, you run the monthly P&L and you're looking for things that should repeat every month. Is the rent showing up every month? Is it missing one month, but then it's doubled in the next month, right? And the reality is, if that's happening, maybe we want to think about recording a monthly bill and memorizing it for the first so that the rent is normalized, right? So that we have the rental income showing up in the right period every single month. These are the kind of things that this checklist was built and designed to get you to stop and think about. Because again, as we're reviewing those reports, especially if that client at some point is looking to get financing from a bank or they have a potential investor looking at their financials, this is the kind of stuff they want to see. A lot of us don't think it matters until year end, and as long as the rent adds up, we think it's fine, which is fine from most sort of bookkeeping standpoints. But the client sometimes has a bigger picture view on this stuff that they need to be able to look at, and we're the ones who are in the best position to be able to help them do that, right? So that's why I think it's important to start working towards setting standards within our firms that say every client is going to have the kind of books and the kind of reports that I would be proud to submit to a bank, and would require minimal sort of pulling it together in order to get them ready. Because if we go through a checklist like this every month, and it only really takes maybe an hour a month at the most to get through this whole thing, and based on the dates and the timing, it's divided up nicely so that I don't have to do this all in one day, right? I'm doing it throughout the month and I spread it out. But if I can do this and be consistent about it and stick to a regimen where somebody has to mark everything assigned to, mark everything completed on, and mark everything completed by, and put comments in if they decide it's not applicable, if I require that of all my bookkeeping staff, and I make sure that we're doing this every month for every client, like I said at the beginning, it's very unlikely you're going to miss anything, and you're going to be so thorough about things with your clients that you're going to blow them away. They're going to think you're a rock star. And so you go through this kind of stuff and you're looking at it. You're looking at things like the health insurance, the liability insurance. Can any of this be compared with external source docs for accuracy? If applicable, run a P&L by job and check for accuracy. Verify the job costing accuracy. Same thing with the classes. So all this we looked at really in the context of the sales and the revenue side. Now we're doing the same thing on the expense side. The banking, by the way, should also include the credit card stuff. I didn't really, that's not really in here specifically, but the idea is that's where that would be included. And then, of course, separate questions testing for payroll, which needs to be done, every week. And then the payroll tax returns are down below in the quarterly. And now here we get back into the sort of the rest of the balance sheet. So now we're going to look at the, or did we get into a new month here? Nope, we're good. So now we're going to just do a general overview of the assets. Again, are the bank accounts reconciled? Review AR, review any loans that are out there, and any other assets that are on the books that we need to drill into and make sure we understand. Like so many times I see employee advances on the books, and I drill in and show the client, and they're like, that's ancient history. It had to have been paid back a long time ago. So we just got to write that stuff off and get rid of it already. If there's inventory, we want to do some testing on inventory and make sure that's accurate. Fixed assets, for the most part, I'm just going to make sure it ties to their tax return. Right? But also drill in and make sure that there are no minor purchases under 500 that really shouldn't be there. And back above, when you're going through the expenses, one of the other things you're always looking for are major purchases, let's say over 500, that maybe should be moved to fixed assets, right? So you're always reviewing this stuff with an eye towards classification. Are things classified in the right place? And then here's a section specifically on liability where, again, we're reminded about the credit cards, any credit lines, loans, and any unearned revenue, right? That customer deposits account that oftentimes gets forgotten, and they record all the invoices and they forget. And, so a lot of times there's really old stuff in the customer deposits accounts that we want to kind of clear out and clean up. And if we monitor that on, the first month or two that you do this, it might take more time because there's probably a lot more stuff to clean up. But if you're doing this consistently every month, it should take minutes to do each of these little sections because everything should be nice and clean. And if anything, all that's going to come up going forward are new things that just came up within the past month, right? So it should be pretty clear and straightforward. How to deal with this. And again, once you get on top of it initially and get past the first, let's say, 2 months of doing this, then everything should be really streamlined and very quick and easy to get through, and just make sure that it stays clean. And again, you just want to make sure you're reviewing and covering everything you need to on a quarterly and annual basis. So my favorite thing from this is the ability to expand and collapse things so that I can quickly and easily jump down and get something. And by the way, I didn't cover it, but the search here also works really well. When I do a search, going back to Suchi's question, if I search for revenue, initially I get this big global search, but I can filter it for just the current sheet, right? And so now I can get very specific. It'll show me these are rows, and there's 95 more because there's a lot of stuff in here on revenue and invoicing. But this is another way to quickly get at information that's in the sheet. So I'm going to shut up for the last 5 minutes or so, for the most part, stop sharing. I know that there's been comments in the chat. I have not been able to pay too much attention to it, so let me bring that up. But who's got questions or comments?
I do.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say when I'll populate the monthly areas, maybe a couple months in advance. I don't populate the whole year unless they've been a client for a long time, mainly because as you're going through, you'll go, oh, I need a row for this. Oh, it'd be helpful to have this. And then I want that in the next
Right.
month.
What we covered when we developed this in 97 and up was I want them uniform. So I want every month to be the exact same size and shape. That's why I filled it out for the whole year, because now what I can do, and I didn't really point this out, but at the end of each month, there's a black line going across. That's my end of the month marker. And what I'm able to do now, using the example, Sarah, that you just brought up, if I need to add a line item for something, then I go back for each month and I add that same line item in for everything. That way,
all the way back to January. So?
Oh yeah, because then at the end of the year, over the year I've grown it to what's going to become the perfect template, or even more perfect for next year. Right? But the way this is set up and the way it's designed to be is now I can take any one of those sections and I can just highlight the entire month and copy and paste it down, which, because it's uniform, it's the same size and shape, makes it really easy for me to update and maintain that way. Whereas if I have some months that have some things and other months that don't, then I can't rely on that anymore. So that's why it's a little extra work to maintain it that way, but it saves you a lot of time in the long run when you are making changes to it. So, because you can even, like I noticed at one point, I had to go back, for example, and add in December of last year. And it adopted the formatting from the top blue row that shows you what year you're dealing with. And so because of the way I've got it set up, I was able to copy and paste the entire month of January and just paste the formatting. So it updated the formatting perfectly for that one section in essentially 2 keystrokes. So
I have a bad habit of reviewing some of my good bookkeepers, like quarterly, not monthly. And so, you know, I might be looking at year to date or, you know, a whole quarter, and I'll go, oh, you know what, you really need to add this to your procedure. So it's always a work in process.
Oh, yeah.
It's become so customized to that client that any bookkeeper should be able to just step in and do the work. And that right there has been the #1 reason for doing that. Not only to be so thorough, because a lot of the stuff, if you've been doing a client for many, many years, you just hop in and just, you know, it's just brain memory. But to actually document it has just given me comfort like you wouldn't believe. Anybody gets sick or and being able to make a template and then copy it over to. So as we onboarded clients, it got easier and easier and easier to onboard the rest of the clients as we built templates. And it's been very interesting to watch how bookkeepers added their own little touches.
Yep.
And then they tell the other, and they go, hey, why don't you put a check, you know, like we'll do one sheet. We have the sheet that we collaborate with the client. We'll almost have like a monthly, quarterly sort of format too, with pending critical items at the top. And it's your reminders, you know, bank statement. And I'll even say, you know, anything that the client has to do. And I may even put, you know, HubDoc so that I don't have to bother them, but, you know, little things like that. But
yeah, in fact, you reminded me, there's a lot of little things that I didn't even show you guys today that, you know, once you have things like that due date in place, you can create alerts that tell Smartsheet, email whoever the assigned to is, you know, a week before that due date, and you can create another alert that says email 2 days before that due date and email on the due date. And then I can have it email me whenever somebody marks something completed, you know, on that day or the day after, so that I know I can jump in and just review it and make sure it got done. And I love getting those kind of alerts. Those are what I call the throwaway emails that I get. But then each day my inbox fills up with these things that I know I need to get done today, you know. And so I click over and it takes me right into the sheet so I can go and follow up on that thing. So,
well, you know, I haven't really used the request feature as much as, you know, I make sure that on the collaborative sheets anyway, that the owners and things like that, they have access to the sheets, but that the ones we're really working with on a weekly basis, they're getting notified when certain cells change.
Yeah.
But when you use the request, it sort of ramps it up a little bit. Because,
well, yeah, it increases the priority. It's a way of saying, hey, I need this from you. You know, it's more proactive, definitely. And I love the setting up the alerts based on changes. Usually I have it set to alert everybody when there's every hour when any changes have been made. you know, you don't want to do it right away because then you flood people with emails, especially if you're making a lot of different changes. But every hour works really well. And then there's also the highlight feature where you can click to highlight anything that's been changed, and you can set the criteria whether you want to see anything that's been changed in the last hour, the last day, since the last time you logged in. There's so many little things that are buried in Smartsheet that make it really easy to see what exactly needs to be addressed. And you can, you know, then within that, you just figure out how you want to use these features and create your workflows around that. And so that's what I've, yeah.
I'm sorry. I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to bring up in the chat, I'm seeing a lot of questions about if you sell this template.
Okay, so this is what I've been trying to get at. So if anybody wants the template, the best thing to do, sign up for 97 and up. As long as you're a member of 97 and up, even for 1 month, you'll get access to the template. You can make a copy of it. You can quit the next month if you want to. My hope, of course, is that you'll stick around for some of the other stuff that we have. But just sign up on Patreon, 97 and up. If you're interested, send me an email, Seth@NerdEnterprises or Seth@SethDavid.com, and I'll shoot you a link to where you can go to sign up for 97 and up. And then once you're signed up there, let me know that you're interested in this template. I'll add you to a workspace that's exclusive to 97 and up, and then you can just make a copy of the template and have at it. So that's how you can get access to it. So essentially, the template will cost you $97. I think it's worth it.
It's totally worth it.
Absolutely worth it. When I think of the hours that we've spent in the last year developing all these sheets, just to get a starting point is like gold.
Yeah. Yep, so sign up for 97 and up. If you're at 25 now, upgrade to 97 for just a month, and you can get the template.
And you get to hang out with us.
And you get to hang out with us
Tuesdays and
twice a week, or you can watch the recordings of the calls, which also go up on SethDavid.com every week. We posted up 2 new episodes just yesterday, actually.
Hey, Seth, how do we upgrade from 25 to 97?
If you go to Patreon and log into your account, you'll see an option where you can edit your pledge.
Got it. Thank you.
You got it. All right, anybody else, any questions before we go? All right, don't forget to do Gina's Hangout later today. Gina, it looks like you're still with us, at least in the participant list, just not by camera. There you are. What's going on today? What time, when, where, how do we get there? What do we do?
5:30 Eastern Time. Have to be a member of my Facebook group so I can add you and give you the link to join. But it is an open session. What you see is what you get.
Very good. Well, hopefully you all found this interesting, enlightening, useful. And Christy, why are you telling somebody to get off your lawn?
You have to read before that.
Okay, I'll go back up and read the chat.
Yeah.
You all have a great day.
It's just funny if you know the
Bye.
All right.
Andrew was talking about that he's still somewhat old school, and he says, I'm like an old man shaking my cane at people, so I wrote, get off my lawn.
That's funny.
And hey, Gina, we can look at Smartsheets deeper if anybody here wants to join.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that idea. I will be there.
I want to talk to you about your QBO certification class.